Hey everybody, my name is CJ McPhail and welcome to Mavericks and Pioneers. I'm here with my co-host, Stephen Gillum.
Woo-hoo.
And today our guest, Eric Johnson.
Anti-host.
Again, the anti-host.
Anti-host. We got to go back to that.
It's so true.
He is owning that title.
I love it. You are the anti-host. We're getting you a shirt. We are getting you a shirt. The anti-host. No, Eric, thanks for being here, man. It's such a pleasure, man. So much fun. So Tuesday night, let's just dive right in. Tuesday night, we had this really fun night with Founders and Creators. And for those of you who don't know or don't remember, Founders and Creators is an 8-week course that the three of us have essentially put together and are teaching over the next 8 weeks. And really excited to bring in entrepreneurs and really challenge them to take meaningful steps towards their dreams, meaningful action towards their dreams is how I guess we like to say it.
Love it.
So Tuesday night's topic was interesting because it's a really counterintuitive one. And it was loving yourself. I'm just going to land it. It was just loving yourself and how important loving yourself, respecting yourself, knowing how you show up. There's lots of ways to say this, how that impacts you as an entrepreneur.
Yes.
So, Stephen, you were there. Let me kick off with you. Like, what stood out to you about that night? What is it about this subject that makes people so squidgy, as my son likes to say?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, one, it's like you said, people absolutely never expect you to say that. You're like, we're going to do an 8-week course for entrepreneurs, and then week 2, we're going to talk about loving yourself. And I think it feels fluffy, it feels emotional.
Wimpy.
And I wonder, I could be totally wrong, I'm speculating right now, but I wonder if men in particular just don't like it.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about loving myself. I want to talk about marketing.
Yeah.
I want to talk about sales.
Yeah.
I want to talk about hiring, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But CJ, the reason why we had this conversation is because what we have found when we have met with other men is behind all the concerns that people think that they have, and they're real. I want to start a business, but I don't feel like I have the money that I need. Maybe you need $50,000, but you don't have $50,000 to start the business. Yeah. Or maybe you feel like a fear that you have is you don't have the expertise or the knowledge to go through the practical steps of setting up an LLC, for example. Those are legitimate concerns. We would never devalue that or delegitimize that.
Yeah.
But in our conversations with people, as we found out that there was a root operating behind that. And that's kind of what you brought out. I'll never forget the first time that we had this conversation. And we went to a local coffee place. It's called Crave Coffee. And I was talking about some friends and close people in my life that I love so much that I feel have a grace for entrepreneurship that could really do well. They have all the knowledge. They have all the wisdom, but they're not doing it. They won't step out. And CJ, you asked such a great question. You said, why do you think that is? Because I have an answer to that question. What's yours? So I was a little stunned. And I thought, well, I think they're afraid. I think they're afraid that it will fail. They're scared about what people are going to think about them, if it doesn't go well. And then you hit me with the hook, line, and sinker. And you said, I think it's because they don't love themselves. And so I'm curious for you to explain that a little bit. Why is that the underlying root of the conversation?
The way I look at loving yourself and why, to me, it's been such a critical part of my growth and maturity as a man, as a husband, as a son, all those things, honestly, it's affected everything for me, I finally got to a point in my life where I knew I had a right to show up.
Come on.
And it wasn't because I'm better than anybody. I think I'm equal to people. Mm-hmm. I don't look at a hierarchy any longer in our culture like our culture likes to define it. I just believe that I have the right to sit at the table with everyone else.
That's good.
I have a voice. I have a gift. It doesn't mean I'm not intimidated sometimes. It doesn't mean I don't experience fear. It doesn't mean any of those things. This is not about arriving. It just means you get to a place where you know you have a place. And you have this thing, and I know some of you watching, you understand this. You've got this thing, and it's hard to describe, so I hate using the word thing, but you have this thing in your gut, in your heart, that you just can't describe, but you've got to do it. You've got to go. But even with that thing, Stephen, what we were talking about, your friend,
yes,
is even though your friend has this thing, she still wasn't moving forward.
That's right. That's exactly right.
That's interesting.
It really is.
I mean, no, that's just fascinating. All the goods, all the talent, all the beauty, all the experience, all the expertise, the following, but still not taking that next step to engage. And I don't want to, we all have to be careful. You can't oversimplify a person's life and nail it down to, I know exactly it's not like that. But generally my heart is, I can't wait for more and more of the kingdom of God to rise up and say, I have a seat here.
So good.
And I don't know even exactly what that looks like, but I know I have a place.
Yeah.
Now, we talked about this earlier, but my wife and I are, we own Outsider Coffee. We're a drive-through coffee chain only. We have 2 locations in Oregon, several coming to Montana, a couple coming to Arkansas, and 2 new ones coming to South Carolina. And one's opening soon. But what not everyone knows is that the one's opening in Pendleton, South Carolina, is butts up to the property of a Dunkin' Donuts. A Dunkin' Donuts that literally just opened. And it's nice.
Yeah.
Like it's one of their new models, like
Yeah.
if that's the right word, I don't know. It's one of their cool new slick things. It looks great. It's a franchise from a conglomerate that owns it from out of state. And our friends are like, why in the world are you opening that thing right there? I mean, my God, of all the places you could go, why in the world would you do it right there? And their answer is, to be honest, first of all, the land was available. Okay, let's be honest. It was available. It was a place that we believed in. It's near the high school where our sons go to school. But also we believe and we know that there's no way Dunkin' Donuts can ever be us. Dunkin' Donuts can never do.
One way to say it.
Donuts.
Dunkin' can never be us. They can never do what we do.
That's right.
And they can never do it in the way we do it, with the spirit that we do it, with the heart for why we do it, the mission in which we do it. I mean, I can go on. Does that mean we're better than Dunkin'? I don't think so at all. In fact, anybody that knows Dunkin's story, it's incredibly inspiring. And in a way, we're honored to be next to them. And we'll find out how they feel about that. I don't know yet. But they cannot be us.
Yeah.
So that means we have a seat at that table too.
Yes.
And now we get to run and bring our team, who's almost fully hired now, and begin the training process. And when we open, you guys, with our customer service model, which I won't go into now, and our ability to ask open-ended questions at the window and deeply, quickly get to know our customers really well, with a team that's incentivized to remember those details. So they're going to know that your dog was named Mark. True story. And that... and that you've lived in South Carolina for 14 years, came from Texas. We're going to know that stuff about you soon over time. And then we're going to remind you of that as you come through and get coffee. Our social media is going to follow up with that. We have wake-up words handwritten on every cup that goes out the window. All the social media feeds follow those wake-up words. We have online training for marriages and podcasts for all sorts of subjects about taking risk and daring and dreaming. And we sell really good coffee. Right?
Yeah.
So the fact is, we have a seat at that table. And that's, to me, what loving yourself looks like.
Love that.
What are your thoughts, Eric? I know you're stewing on some things, but as all this gets raveled, what are you thinking?
Yeah. No, it's a big question. And as being a man, of course, that's like, okay, it's not that big of a deal.
Right.
So I think there are other ways to frame it. Do you believe in yourself?
Yeah.
Do you believe have what it takes?
Yeah.
Which essentially, if we get down to it, it helps. I think it helps men specifically to warm up to the idea of actually loving yourself. Yeah. If there's another entry point. So when I think about loving yourself, I have to even tell myself, because I get that's a little fluffy, but it actually is very true. It's really important. So just for the context of anybody listening, it's obviously a huge deal. I think that's where, if we can get down to the basics of a foundation of we know we are loved, and then loving ourselves is a huge piece of that. It's huge. I mean, I wonder how many people out there are doing things not because they love themselves, because they're trying to prove themselves. They're trying to do something that they're trying to get love or trying to get acceptance or trying to get. And so we know that's clear. Yeah. But it's a whole different dynamic, because then it's not based, when you actually live out of loving yourself, then the circumstances can change, but you stay the same.
Yes.
But if you are motivated because you want someone to approve you, then if that doesn't happen, then you change. Yeah. And so I think that's the beauty of, the more we can get back down to the foundation of loving ourselves, the more we are the same person through any circumstance, situation. And then the amount of energy and power and, quote, magic that comes from you is really dynamic. And that's where the confidence thing comes into play. And that's where confidence really does come from. It doesn't come in from what I do. It comes in from who I am.
Yes.
And so instead of instead of doing something to get it, it's actually coming from I'm being something. So I think it's a huge conversation. Yeah. The question I would ask is, how do you get that? Yeah. What are pathways to getting back to that? And How do you, because you can tell someone, hey, you need to love yourself, but that usually doesn't help.
Sure.
You
Yeah,
know,
that's right.
Hey, you need to love yourself. You need
Where's that book?
Now
Yeah.
I'm just beating myself up for not loving myself.
yeah, and then it's just
thing I'm
endless
not doing.
cycle. It's just endless. And so I think it'd be interesting to talk about how do we actually help someone love themselves?
Yeah.
If someone's convinced, like, okay, I need to love myself. Now, how do I do that?
Yeah.
So I'll give an example. I mean, I don't know if we're going to just dive right in.
Dive in. You've got some good examples, Stephen.
I was in a men's group a few years ago, and I just remember saying, so what you just mentioned a second ago, Eric, is you were more or less talking about like a performance-driven identity. You know, I'm doing this to try to prove who I am, which essentially we're trying to earn our value. And we do that in the eyes of other people, and we certainly do it in the eyes of God, which is counter-gospel. You know, your value actually comes to you because of what Jesus did. It's intrinsic to you. You didn't earn it. And you don't have to. You know, my son, of course, my daughter, they don't have to earn my love. They had it before they could ever contribute to my life in any meaningful way, just by being here, you know. And so I remember saying to this group of men, I was like, I don't know that I know how to receive mercy. I don't know that I know how to receive mercy. And I'm talking to this group of guys, and I realized, like, I always feel good in my relationship with God when I'm performing, when I'm reading my Bible, whatever the checklist that Christians may have, you know. And I'm not good with God when I'm not doing well, and I'm struggling with sin, or I'm being lazy or apathetic. Whatever those things are. And so, to me, I think a door, an entry point for learning to love myself was going, okay, God, I confess to you right now, I'm not sure I know how to receive mercy. And I don't want my relationship with you to be dictated by my performance. Now, do we care about living an obedient life before the Lord? Absolutely. That goes without saying. But that obedience is from love, not for it. It's from grace, not for it. And so when I first started going on that journey, I literally asked God, like, I don't know how to do this, but help me to receive mercy from you and to believe about myself what you say. So that was a good starting place for me.
And one of the challenges in this conversation, if I can kind of go back to that, the idea of there are people listening, they may not know God, or they don't have that kind of relationship with God. So that's a whole different conversation. So let's start with someone that doesn't know God. How do they love themselves? I mean, that's an interesting conversation, because we actually, how do you, and I think for some people, they're in an environment where they have to perform to receive love or recognition or attention. And so my challenge would be to anybody, like, get around people that actually are pulling ahead, not holding you back. And I think, so there's some dynamics in this. I'm curious what you guys would say to someone that doesn't experience God in that way, where he's the one that shapes you and forms you. Because I know there's people, and you guys know them, they're out, their relationship with God is very static. It's a being in the cosmos, and he's just there. But he's not the one that's shaping and forming me and giving me identity. So what would you say to someone like that?
I have an answer.
Yeah, hit it.
I think I would say identify what makes you uniquely you.
I agree with that.
What is your unique skill set, your unique experience, your talents? What is it about you that separates you from everyone else? And start there. And then place value upon that thing. If you are not aware of what separates you from the rest of humanity, you're probably not going to have a lot of value for yourself. And sometimes it's helpful to have conversations with loved ones that you actually trust, that speak into your life, that level you up instead of bring you down, like you said. And I would literally ask someone, like, hey, what separates me from other people? Like, what is it about me that's unique and special and kind of carves out my place in the world? I think if you can identify that and place value upon it, you started on the journey. What do you think, CJ?
I agree with that. You know, it reminds me, I had a conversation. I used to work in healthcare for a while, and I was a director of development for a foundation in a hospital system. My boss, who was a vice president there, used to tell me all the time, Siege, if you really want to grow this team like you're telling me you do, this is such interesting advice, then you need to do one big thing for me. I'm like, okay. She goes, you need to hire people that intimidate you.
Wow.
And I was like, oh. She goes, because if you don't, the team will only rise to your level. And I'm not saying she said that your level is bad. I'm just saying that if you want to grow this team and we want to be this kind of foundation that's going to redefine how hospital philanthropy can work anywhere in the country, then you're going to have to get comfortable hiring people that are more experienced than you, probably older than you, probably have done other things than you, and that you could easily look at on your own time and go, I'm really kind of intimidated by this person. She goes, the mistake that too many leaders make is they do not hire those people, and they suffer as a result. So it's a part of my answer, but I think surrounding yourself with people that in some ways do intimidate you maybe a little bit, and having those people that are going to push you forward, to your point, Eric, a little bit. And I will say we hired one gal, I won't use her name because she's still there, and I'll be honest, in the interview process I was like, my gosh, she's a rock star.
Yeah.
It's like, holy cow, this woman is like phenomenal. I mean, I can't even believe she wants to come all the way to Oregon to work for us. And she did. And she is now the senior executive vice president of the entire healthcare system. And I'm so proud of her. We're still friends. I see her all the time when I go out to Oregon. I see her, and I'm just so proud of her. So she's probably going to listen at some point. She knows who she is. Good job.
Yeah.
And I'm really proud to have gotten that advice and actually acted on it.
Yes.
And it produced something that's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
I try to take people back. So if for people that are in the framework of God, and there is a God, and if they at minimum believe in the idea that we're all created in His image, I try to take people back to that. And the idea for me, like you take any artist, you take the top artist today, music, painting, sculpture, dance, any of at the top of their world. Every piece of art they create is almost like they took a part of themselves, and it's an expression of who they are.
Yeah.
So it's their creation.
That's good.
And I think some of the best art that I've experienced, whether it's music or any of these mediums I mentioned, if you have a chance to listen to the artist talk about their creation, it came from a part of their soul.
Yeah.
It's an expression and output of their soul. So if we take that reality, and that's humans, take the reality of God. He created us in His image. Yeah. So the way I look at it, He actually took a part of Himself and put it in a human. And so the ability to go, the uniqueness is so deeply connected to the reality that we are made in the image of God, and that Eric, Stephen, CJ are a part of who God, and God wanted humanity to experience that part of Him by putting us on earth.
Yes.
So I try to bring people back to understand that there is a uniqueness. And then you move into what you were designed to do, what you're saying. What are the things that make you come alive? So I think for people listening, I think for them to understand that there is a uniqueness. And then to me, it's not much of a jump from that truth to being loved.
Yes.
Like it's right around the corner from that. It's this reality of like, oh, God created the uniqueness in me, and it's actually love that actually created that.
Yes.
So that's kind of the path I try to take people on, into that reality.
Interesting. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So good. I love that, man, what you just said. So the way that we framed it, you mentioned the Founders and Creators course, and the way that we framed it the other night was we asked the question, like, how do you know that you're loving yourself well? What are some indicators? Which is kind of along the lines of your question. One of the ones that I wrote down that I did not mention the other night.
Oh, good.
Is I know that I'm loving myself well when I live courageously.
Yeah.
I think one of the most simple yet profound ways to move in this direction, and again, if you don't like the language of loving yourself, which we haven't even talked about the biblical foundation of it yet, valuing yourself, believing in yourself, whatever language resonates with you, great. Okay, if you want to move in that direction, do the things that scare you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do the things that scare you. What is it that you feel drawn to, you feel called to, you have a longing, a desire to step out in? What are those dreams that you're currently paralyzed by?
Yeah.
Those fears, go do them.
Yeah.
I promise you, if you act courageously, you will be filled with love for yourself, because there is nothing more rewarding than conquering those giants. You know, CJ, I don't even know if we intended to talk about this, but you and I just finished a pretty difficult challenge. And for those listening, watching that aren't aware, if you've ever heard of something called 75 Hard, and I like to call it 75 Hell, because that's what it felt like.
Hard and hell.
It was rough, man. It was really difficult, but it's a challenge that's meant to create mental toughness in people, discipline, grit. And you could go online and look up the requirements, but it's pretty rigorous. 2 workouts a day, 45 minutes each. 1 has to be outside. You drink a gallon of water a day. I mean, all these things. Pick a diet, you know.
True.
But 75 Hard, the thing about that experience for me is that it was something that was incredibly daunting. And I was terrified to do it. CJ, this jerk sitting next to me right here, invited me to do it. And I thought, that is the last thing I want to do over Christmas break.
Yeah.
We've got a vacation coming up. This is going to be utterly inconvenient. But dude, we did it.
We did it. I am proud of that.
So you and your wife, Lindsay, Aaron and I, the four of us, we did it. I wanted to give up 1,000 times.
Yeah.
But the first book that I read, so part of the task that you have to do is you have to read 10 pages of nonfiction every day. Mm-hmm. So the first book I read was Andy Frisella's book, 75 Hard. Yep. And his central thesis of the book, super simple, is that hard equals happy. Mm-hmm. And what he simply means by that is if you want to be happy in life, do what's difficult, and that will bring you fulfillment. And so that's why I say act courageously, because I realize when I take those challenges on, it totally transforms the way I perceive myself and what I'm capable of.
So good, dude. And you're talking about courage. I just want to add to that real quick. And yay for Stephen and Aaron and Lindsay and us doing that together. I'm really proud. And I want to give you credit, Eric, a little bit. You said at the end of a sermon not long ago, that if you didn't take anything else away, and I believe it was in a Daniel series at the time, find a couple friends and go change the world.
Yes.
Right? I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but roughly.
Find friends and change the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I, we've done that, and I believe that's what 75 Hard represented for me. It's like, yeah, it was mental toughness, but we weren't doing it alone, and it's just so cool. But I look at courage, and I love that word. It's a confusing word though. And I have an opinion on courage. I want to hear what you guys have to say about it because it relates to loving yourself. What comes first? Courage. You have courage and then you go because you had courage? Or do you go and then find courage?
I love this question. You posed it before.
Which one?
I'm going to shut up because I want to hear Eric's answer. But
I think it's an ecosystem.
Okay.
I think it's an ecosystem.
Okay,
now,
good.
What started it? I mean, the chicken or the egg?
Okay.
No one knows, but I do think it's an ecosystem. I actually think faith is similar in that regard. Like you're given faith. We know that we didn't create courage, so we know that. God put something in us that had our soul has a part of us that has a spot that's called courage.
Yeah.
So where it started is really not the point. But if you don't actually use it, it just never it dies. Yeah. So I do think it's an ecosystem. I think the more courage you have, the more you get it. And so I actually think it's a muscle.
Yes.
And I think all of us can go, are we more courageous today than we were 10 years ago? For me, I'd say absolutely. Yeah. But I had to exercise it.
Yes.
Right.
It wasn't one big thing. It was a bunch of little decisions and some big ones along the way, but it's like this ecosystem. And so I do think it's something you have to practice and keep doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think when your courage kind of reaches its max, and it's like, okay, what's the next courageous thing to do?
Yes.
It's kind of like your threshold expands. So you guys probably will do 75 hard again someday, but it won't be nearly as hard.
I don't receive that.
Maybe 100 hard? I don't know if there is such a thing.
That's right.
Please God, no.
But you're like, I know I can do it.
Of course.
You're like, I know
There's
what
no
it takes.
question.
I know what it entails.
There's no question.
So you're going to have to find another line to go that's going to actually require courage. So the way I look at it is an ecosystem.
Yeah, I love that.
It's fun.
So I was thinking about, I mentioned this to you, CJ, recently. I had a conversation with a friend. So we're teaching this course.
Yeah.
And this guy has tremendous business ideas. And this is the story of a lot of people that I've encountered. Fantastic ideas. They've done their market research. Mm-hmm. They have a good idea of who their customer base would be. They know who their vendors would be. I'm like, dude, are you kidding me? You kind of have all the answers, but you haven't moved. This is what he said to me. He said, Stephen, I love your message, but man, I'm like super risk averse. And I just passionately almost like yelled it at the guy, but I was like, buddy, I am risk averse.
Yes.
I wasn't always like this.
Yeah.
Exactly what you just said. It was one step of courage after another, and it was building blocks. And so the first step of courage for me, I own a bearing company. We sell industrial bearings wholesale. So the first major step, of course, was just starting the business. Mm-hmm. That was terrifying. It was right in the middle of COVID. I had a newborn baby, and it was like I had friends, family, even customers called me on the phone, be like, "Are you insane, dude? Yeah. Like, are you okay?"
I am.
Yeah. Actually, yes.
Most entrepreneurs are.
But yeah, you do. You have to have a little bit of crazy,
That's
right? And so that initial step, it was a big step. But of course, and CJ, this is to your point, if I did not actually believe in myself, i.e., love myself, there's no shot I'm going to do that. When you've got 2 other mouths to feed plus your own, you better believe that you can get the job done. Yeah. Well, thankfully, I had just enough courage. But what that looked like was starting a little bearing company out of my garage. Very little expenses. I put, I think, $10,000 on a credit card. Good luck getting a bank to loan to you as a new business. Usually they say 2 years minimum, and these days it's even worse than that.
It is.
It is.
To get a line of credit, all of it. So there was no option for me, but we went for it. But of course, a few months later, it's now you got to move into a warehouse space, and you're outgrowing, and so that took another level of courage. But every single time, and if our listeners get anything, please hear me. I was terrified. Mm-hmm. The fear was not absent. It was not absent, excuse me. And we know this, probably heard it 1,000 times, but courage is not the absence of fear, right? For me, it's just denying its influence. Yeah. And so I was terrified. I didn't know if we had what it took, but I stepped anyway. Yeah. And over time, now I'm in a place now where we're making massive moves, doing some things that, require tremendous amount of resource, and it's super exciting. But I didn't have that courage 3 years ago. Yeah. It was a muscle that I worked.
Yeah. And that ecosystem, Eric, I'm going to steal your phrase. I love it. That ecosystem suggests to me that you don't arrive. You're just constantly building. Mm-hmm. Yes. You're constantly growing. Mm-hmm. I remember being asked a long time ago by a friend that was much older than me, a mentor really. He said, CJ, do you remember where it says in the scripture, like Jesus said, be perfect as my heavenly Father is perfect? I'm like, yeah, that's always bothered me, man. Like, I am not that guy, And he goes, have you ever really thought about what it means, though? I'm like, not really. And I'm a Bible college grad, for crying out loud. But, it's just one of those verses that I think I just skipped over. Like,
it's uncomfortable.
I'll come back to that one, someday, some year, some decade. But here I am, just a couple years out of Bible college. This guy's asked me that, and he goes, well, look it up. Let's look it up together real quick. This is before cell phones. And he had this book, and we look it up, and perfect means, which I didn't know at the time, basically, it's present tense in that verse, mature and maturing. Mm-hmm. So be maturing, be mature as my Father is mature. Like, keep going, keep growing, keep expanding, keep walking. Don't stop.
So good.
And we are like him in that process. Mm-hmm. So not arriving, not announcing that I've arrived. You guys, you losers need to figure things out. It's not like that. It's just keep going. And I love that. Mm-hmm. Is that kind of hit the tone, Eric, though, what you're talking about when you think of ecosystem? I mean, can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Because I think that's such a fascinating idea.
Yeah. I mean, it's courage beget more courage.
Yes.
Yeah. Courage creates more courage, at least experientially. Mm-hmm. Now, the challenge is when you have courage and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I love following sports, or the Giannis Antetokounmpo. I can't pronounce his last name, but he's one of the best players in the NBA. He plays for the Milwaukee Bucks. Nice. And someone asked him, this was last year, it's a viral YouTube interview that he did. And someone asked him about failing. And you guys lost, you failed, you didn't reach, your goal was to win the championship, and you didn't even get to it. Wow. And they asked him all these questions, he got irate, he got angry.
I've seen the interview.
It's an incredible interview.
It's so good.
I haven't seen it.
You got to go look it up, and I'll butcher it, but basically he said, I don't believe there's such a thing as failure.
Nice. Mm.
He said, everything I do is moving me farther down, moving me closer.
Yes.
And I believe he got the concept from Kobe Bryant.
Yeah.
So there's this whole train of thought in sports that I fully love and fully embrace. Yes, that feels like failure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But if you can reframe it and like, nope, this didn't work, and we're going to keep going.
Absolutely.
I wonder how many risk-averse people, they failed, and that has shaped them like, I can't do this shit again.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think we need to reframe what everyone says is failure into something else.
Yes.
And so I think if we can do things like that, then even if it doesn't work, I'd gain something. I'd learn something. And we always love to talk about how past failures and mistakes helped us to grow. But when you make it, you don't think about that. No. You're just in the pain of it all.
That's right.
So I do think we need to probably just bolster our conversations around, hey, when you do fail, don't work it out. I'm at the point in my life where if someone tries something and it failed, I celebrate the fact that they tried it.
Yes.
I have a friend who wrote a book, and people said, why are you writing that book? There's already 20 people that have written on the same topic. And she said, well, at least I wrote one.
That's right.
Yeah.
Her whole thing was just like, so I think that's that ecosystem.
I like that.
And I think we need to make sure the ecosystem keeps going, even if we, quote, failed or didn't work out the way we wanted it to.
Yeah.
I love that so much. So I actually had a conversation with a guy in business recently, and I basically told him, because that's the fear, obviously. Ultimately, like, what if the whole freaking thing fails, and I lose money, whatever it is, I lose reputation. And I just said to the guy, I said, this is how I really feel. I'm at a place in my life now. I'm young, 35 years old, but I'm at a place now, like, even if my company were to close doors tomorrow, God forbid, but something happens, I feel like I'm at a place now where I'm like, okay, no problem. I'm going to pivot and go another direction.
That's right.
And the lessons that I learned, the skills that I gained, invaluable.
That's right.
And so even if one project fails, that's not the story of my life. One quote unquote failure is not the sum total of who Stephen Gillum is or my story. That's just an experience that gave me tools, resources, knowledge, experience that will propel me to the future. And so in my mind, and I don't say this with an ounce of arrogance, I mean, in all sincerity, it's like, I can't lose. Like, God is behind me. The wind is at my back. I mean, of course, there's practical wisdom that we need to implement when we're running a business. And certainly you could run a business to the ground, but that goes without saying. For me, it's like, I can promise you, if you had the entrepreneurial heart and the desire to go after it and the willingness to work it, the first one may not work. The second one may not work. You will find something that works.
Yeah.
And it will be successful if you stick at it, because you're going to keep growing. So that's kind of my heart.
And what's cool is the byproduct. What I'm reminding of as you guys are talking about this is the byproduct of that ecosystem. It's not just that there's an ecosystem and you're maturing and growing. You're also gaining relationships.
Yes.
You're meeting people that you never would have met. You couldn't even imagine of meeting. There would be no other context to have met them, except that you put yourself in this position and now there's this person.
So good.
Or those people, or that company, or that resource, or that organization. I mean, all those things. I mean, all of that comes into play. I think I can only imagine what you would say, Eric, but you and Candace. But now that I'm in South Carolina, and it will be June that we have been here for 3 years. I think you guys are in the same boat.
Same.
I mean, I want to cry talking about. I can't even imagine my life without the people in my life as a result of being in South Carolina. I mean, what are your thoughts there? And that ecosystem. Now what's that doing to grow me, I guess, is my point. And to continue that on as an entrepreneur, but also as a dad and as a husband and all those things. It's just exciting.
Yeah, I think it was Steve Jobs who talks about it. He did a speech. I keep bringing up speeches. I love speeches.
Go for it. Love it.
I think it was the commencement speech at Stanford graduation a long time ago now. And he was basically talking about, when you look back on life, if you didn't meet that person, this would have never happened. If you didn't get around this, that would have never happened. And he basically, life is a bunch of dots that just get connected. So absolutely. I mean, the relationship, this conversation right here is connected to something later. So I think when you can just embrace life that way, for me, it gives me more courage and more like, man, I don't know what's around this corner. I don't know what's around this corner. And I look back just on the last 3 years of starting something from the ground up to what it is today. I'm like, if I didn't meet that person, this whole thing would have never happened. How we got our building, just all these things that just come with starting something from nothing. We moved from our apartment offices to a small office, which was, here's a 2-year lease. And then, but that allowed me to meet this person, which led me to. And so, if we look back on our life right now, it's clear that life is a bunch of dots that are now connected. For me, that gives me incredible courage and excitement. Like everything's available. So absolutely, to answer your question, I think courage comes from living life and taking a look at these connections led me to here.
Yes.
So good. So kind of starting to land the plane here for today's talk. But what's at stake? And I want both you guys to answer. What's at stake if you don't put yourself in a place to begin loving yourself and continue that ecosystem in your life? I mean, what are the consequences of not engaging in this conversation as an entrepreneur, for sure? Because this is what we're here to talk to entrepreneurs and inspire entrepreneurs, but also for anyone. I mean, what's at stake there?
Well, I mean, you can look at it two ways too. So if you don't love yourself and you love yourself, both have success.
Yeah.
But the one that doesn't love yourself only have external success.
Yeah.
They don't have internal success. So what's at stake is this internal success, this internal peace, the kind of peace that surpasses all logic and reason. So for me, so it's not like you're not going to be successful, because you can look, I mean, some of the biggest companies in the world are led by people that hate themselves.
Yes.
So we can't go,
good.
this business is going to be successful because I love myself.
Sure.
Good.
You know what I mean? So I think we have to, then what is success? For me, the conversation is like, do you want internal success? Like, do you want to have this overwhelming peace and calm that just overrides logic and reason and all life's experiences? If that's what you want, then you have to start here.
Yeah.
There's just no way around it.
Yeah.
And obviously, with our faith, we would say God is the one that defines loving ourselves.
Yes.
So in our faith, that was it. But that's what I would tell someone. You can be successful here, have great businesses in both outcomes, but this one won't have that inner peace. They won't get to 80 years old and be like, wow.
Yeah.
They were like, I didn't do enough. They're going to be driven by something else.
Yes.
So I think that's what that state, that internal peace that overrides all logic and reason.
Yep.
That's what's at stake.
So good.
That's amazing. I absolutely agree. I love all of that. And I think on the other side of the equation are the people that just never step out. And so they end up living, in my opinion, what would be like a subpar existence. It's like you're not the best version of yourself because you don't actually believe in yourself. And so there are all these dreams that are not being accomplished. And see, the thing is about courage is it's infectious, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not just your life that you're affecting now. Now it's your family, your friends. You change the room when you walk into it, right? There's an atmosphere that you carry with you, you know?
good.
And so this is something, Eric, that you majored on or talked about, one night in a talk. And I remember thinking, like, I need to be super aware of what's going on in here, because when I walk in a room, there's an opportunity for the atmosphere to change, right? So I'm thinking about, people that when they start to pursue their dreams, because, okay, now I love myself. Now I believe in myself. Now I believe I can do this. I'm going to go after it. That has the potential to impact your entire legacy.
Yeah.
Not just your kids, but your grandchildren and their grandchildren, because now there's this, like, we keep using the word ecosystem of courage. We could use the word faith, of risk, of willingness to step out on the dreams that otherwise would have never been accomplished.
So good.
And to me, it's all the difference in the world. It's like, what do you want to be able to say at the end of your life that, like, you took some amazing risk and some of them didn't pan out, right?
Yeah.
Certainly, I can promise you, if you're an entrepreneur, some things you try will fail.
Yeah.
You're going to make some investments that don't turn out, but at the end of the day, you'll be able to say, "I did it, dude."
So good.
That's what I think.
It's so good. I love what you said there towards the end, and I like to do this, and obviously a lot of people do. Start with the end in mind.
Yeah.
And as I think about what's at stake for myself and for my friends, I just think, I know how I want to feel, and I know what I hope to be in a position to physically, literally say at that point. And like you guys both, I've been around a number of people at the end of their life, and really good people, and a number of kids. And I'm not saying this to be a downer. I'm saying what I've learned in that experience, and you can learn from me if you haven't had that experience. If you're listening or watching this right now, is people at that time, whether they're 90, 100, I've seen that, 7 years old, I've seen that too. They're not interested in talking about what they've accomplished. They're not wanting to show you their toys. They're not wanting to brag about their accounts or discuss why retirement was so special. They're wanting to talk about the people in their life. They want to talk about those relationships, and that's what mattered. And they want to be surrounded by those people if possible, and it brings them such hope and joy. And of course, if you're a person of faith, and that's a whole nother conversation. That's a whole nother dimension, literally, to this conversation. But I start with the end in mind, and I think what's at stake is if I don't, use your word, Eric, if I don't continue in this ecosystem, then what I risk is getting to that point and feeling much more regret than I do much more joy.
Wow.
And I am not going to, I'm saying this publicly, I am not going to be at that point and have regret on that level. I mean, no, I'm not because I've arrived, but because I'm just so damn proud of having just accomplished and achieved and striven and failed and got back in. It's Teddy Roosevelt's The Man in the Arena. Yeah. I'm going to bring that to one of these podcasts and read it. It's my favorite writing of all time outside of, I guess, God's word. I mean, we have to say that, but my gosh, I love Teddy Roosevelt and what he did in his life and what he wrote in the speech in The Man in the Arena, that it's not the man who can walk and walk with straight and pride and joy. It's the man that gets down in the dirt, the man that fights down in the arena,
It's
the man that has dust and is marred with his scars. And, he's such vivid language. I want that.
Yes.
And I think most people do. It's not unique to me. I want that. So what's at stake is feeling mediocre at that point at the end. Feeling like, it's good. It gives me chills.
Yes.
I want to say it wasn't perfect. My gosh, what a ride. Look what we did. Look at this. And to me, that starts now.
Absolutely.
That starts right now. And I think for our listeners, that starts now. Any final thoughts from you, Stephen, as we wrap this up?
No, man. I love the conversation so much, and I my hope and my prayer is that people would start to find their value, to believe in it, and to start to live and act courageously. I think it can transform everything in your life. That's all I would say. How about you, Eric?
Agreed. I think it's the same thing. I would just encourage people to get back to work really hard, put their work in to get here.
Yes.
To loving yourself. If that means meeting with a therapist, then do that.
Yes. Thank you for saying
meeting
that.
with friends and opening up about you don't love yourself, then do that. Just do the work. And it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be awkward. It's going to be all the above. But the dividends for the rest of your life will be priceless. So I would say just do the work. It's just too much is at stake. Your own well-being is at stake.
Yep.
And so just do the work, and it's worth it.
That's it.
Love it.
That's it. Well, you guys, thanks for being here today. Eric, thanks for being a guest again. We're so proud and so grateful that you're here. Stephen, I love you, man. Super fun. For those of you watching, we just want to ask one thing, that you would share this podcast. There's links below to all of our social media, all the cool stuff. You'll see that down below. But really what I want to say to you directly is, please share this with a friend, a loved one, someone in your life that you know needs to hear this kind of a message so they too can start taking meaningful action towards their dreams. See you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to Mavericks and Pioneers podcast, where we empower current and aspiring entrepreneurs to take meaningful action towards their dreams. We'll see you next time.